Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Your Company Health podcast, the podcast where we highlight the success stories of business owners and professionals. I'm your host, Andre Wright, the owner of the Wright Consult Digital Marketing. Today, we have Jason Falls, a digital marketing leader, speaker, podcaster, and an author. Jason, as you know, digital marketing is my wheelhouse, and I'm really excited to talk to you today. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, Andre.
Fantastic, fantastic. So to get things going, I want you to tell us about your background and your professional journey.
Sure. So out of college, I wanted to be an ESPN anchor. So I went to my undergraduate degree was in radio, TV communications, and then I went to West Virginia University for a master's degree in sports administration because my athletic director at Morehead State, where I did my undergraduate, told me that I probably needed a master's degree if I wanted to get the attention of folks like ESPN. So I did that, and then after that, I had an interview at ESPN and an interview at ABC to be a radio producer. I had a background in radio. I'd worked in radio in high school. And so the ESPN guy called me a couple days after my interview and said, I would like to offer you the internship, but I can't because the guys at ABC, which owns ESPN, called me and said I couldn't hire you because they're going to. So I worked at ABC Radio Sports in New York for a couple of years right out of college. That became a career in public relations. I left ABC and went back to Morehead State and then a couple other schools as kind of the PR guy for the athletic programs. I did that for 15 years, and then my son was born. I realized I was traveling too much. I wasn't going to be able to see my kid very often. So I got out of that and went into mainstream advertising, marketing, and PR. It just so happened that because I had worked in an environment in athletics where I was constantly using computers and technology and the internet to try to figure out how to get information out faster and whatnot, I was really sort of digitally inclined. So I was at an agency in Louisville, Kentucky, and the CEO said, man, I don't know what you're talking about with all these blogs and social networks, but if you can figure it out and sell it to our clients, then you can do it. And so he put a lot of faith in me, and I was able to throw out some ideas to some clients like Maker's Mark Bourbon and whatnot at the time. This was in the early to mid 2000s. And they started saying, yeah, we want to do that. Let's invest in, blogs. Let's invest in social networks and social media. And because I was working with some, decent clients at the time, and there wasn't a whole lot of social media marketing going on. That was when brands were first really starting to get into it. I started getting invited to speak at conferences and whatnot, and that kind of snowballed into writing a couple of books. And so I've been basically a digital strategist in and out of the agency world. I worked at Cafe Press, which is an online retailer, for a couple of years too. But I've mostly been a consultant and or someone who's a strategist at an agency helping clients figure out the digital space to grow their business.
Fantastic. And based on what we heard, you have extensive experience in the not only in radio but in the digital marketing space. So I want you to tell us about your client base. Are you, in terms of your industry, you're specific to a vertical? How do you operate?
No, so CoreNet is the agency where I work. We're in Lexington, Kentucky, and it's a full-service integrated marketing firm. Just an ad agency is a simple way to put it. We are really good at tourism, travel and tourism marketing. We do the local CVB, we do the Buffalo Trace Distillery, we do Keeneland Racecourse. We do a lot of travel tourism kind of destination marketing, but we're really a full-service creative agency. I mean, we handle A&W restaurants. We also do the University of Kentucky and the University of Kentucky healthcare system. So we're in healthcare as well. We spend a good portion of our time on the Sazerac family of bourbons from the Buffalo Trace Distillery. We also do work with GE Appliances, with Procter and Gamble, with Valvoline. So we kind of run the gamut. Most of what we do is in the B2C space. We have done and do some B2B work from time to time, but we're really much more of a consumer marketing firm. We kind of, our tagline that we use is we make creativity your business advantage. So our creativity, our creative team is really our strength. We kind of lead with that, creativity and strategy. And we have just a wide variety of really cool clients that are fun to work with, and a couple that even let us kind of go nuts sometimes and do some really fun creative stuff. So it's a good place to be.
And that's great, Jason. So I was reviewing your site and even looking at your blogs. I know you're big on influencer marketing. You know, I know our audience may be, you know, thinking about influencer marketing. They were thinking about, hey, so we just get this big movie star or this, you know, professional athlete to be on our page. I want you to talk to us about what is influencer marketing and why does a business owner should get involved?
Sure. So, you know, I'm glad you asked it that way because I think there is a misperception out there about what influencers are and how they can help your business. Because I think the mainstream media and sort of the superficial conversation is, well, that influencers are people with, you know, millions of followers on social networks like Instagram and YouTube, and they're really superficial and they just take selfies of themselves. And I don't know why anybody would ever send them product to just get basically a product placement on an Instagram post. And that's a very, those superficial, what I call peace sign duck lips influencers, you know, those people. That's a very small, you know, portion of what's out there in the world of influencers. There are plenty of people out there who, and think about it a little differently. If you call them content creators instead of influencers, then you're focusing on what they're really good at, what they're talented at, whether it's creating great content, video content for YouTube, or creating great, you know, snackable content for TikTok or Instagram stories, or creating really good imagery on Instagram and some of these other social networks. If you look at the world of content creators, not just influencers, now you're talking about, you know, hundreds of thousands, even millions of people that have an interesting skill and an interesting ability to connect with an audience on these social networks that you may not have. And so if you are trying to get to people like their audience and you can collaborate with them for them to create content with you, whether it's on your channels or their channels, now all of a sudden you've got something that's a win-win for everyone. And so that's the first layer of kind of the misperception of out there of influencers. There's a bunch of great influential people who have followings online that are great content creators and engage with their audience really well. So it's a very effective way to get to that audience. But you also have to take another couple steps back and say, what is an influencer? Well, an influencer is anyone who can persuade an audience to take action or think differently about something. And that could literally be anyone. I mean, I've been influenced by the conversation between two people in line at the grocery store that I don't know. So if you think about influence marketing without the R instead of influencer marketing, then it kind of brings that perspective back a little bit further. And you're like, oh, wait a minute. Okay, who influences the audience I'm trying to reach? If you're a local business, a small business in a given community, and your target audience is soccer moms, then a 250,000 person influencer on Instagram isn't going to help you, but the president of the local PTA might be perfect, right? And so that person may not have any followers online, but they have an audience that they influence that if you partner with them in some relevant way, not a spammy marketing advertising way, but if you partner with them in a relevant way and give them great content, great resources, great knowledge, now all of a sudden you've got a mechanism to get to the audience that they influence. So I actually wrote a book that's brand new called Winfluence, Reframing Influencer Marketing to Ignite Your Brand, which kind of goes over that perspective of rethinking what influencer marketing really is so that you can focus on being more strategic with it.
Yeah, definitely. And I want you to touch more on that book. But before you do that, I mean, if I'm hearing correctly, so you're saying if you're a business owner and thinking about influencer marketing, you have to be strategic. It's not just being before a Cristiano Ronaldo with 10 million followers. If you're a local business trying to target a local audience, you know, so in essence, you have to be strategic in how you utilize this type of marketing. And as you know, it's with any marketing, you have to define that target audience and know what you're trying to do. And exactly. Jason, you know, I was reading your latest blog, and you spoke a little bit about fake followers. Mm-hmm. And I want you to, you know, as it relates to influencer marketing. So tell us about that.
So there's actually a documentary on HBO right now called Fake Famous. It's by the director Nick Bilton, who is a writer for the New York Times and Vanity Fair. So he's a very well-respected journalist. He did a documentary that just launched on HBO last week called Fake Famous. And in that, he basically explores this world of what I would call the superficial, the peace sign duck lips influencers, the people who he says that the majority of influencers out there, and that's where I disagree with him because I don't think it's the majority, but he says because the majority of people who are influencers out there buy followers. So they buy fake bots to go out and create fake accounts and follow you, so that it inflates your follower count, so that businesses and brands go, oh, that person's got 250,000 followers. We should send them free product, or we should invite them on a vacation, or we should, pay them to post on our behalf. That is a problem in the influence marketing industry. That is out there. It does happen. Nick seems to think and seems to claim in his documentary that it's the majority of influencers. I've worked with influencers in some regard my entire career, even before it was called influencer marketing. And I don't think it's more than probably 15 or 20% of what's out there. But because it's out there, business owners need to know and be aware of it. And so there's a couple of things you can do to sort of know if you're looking at an influencer that you want to use for your business. You need to kind of gut check and see, okay, do their comments sound like they're from genuine people? Is there real conversation going on, or is it just people saying, LOL, you look great, gal, because that's all stuff that can be automated by bots. When you look at their content, do they really get engaged with their audience? Is their audience responsive to it? Would you be responsive to that particular content? And then look and see if they've done sponsored content before. And if they have, how well did they do? Did they really get behind it? Were they really connected to this sponsor and this product? And did they do a good job of communicating that to their audience? There's some ways that you can kind of assess whether or not an influencer's content will work. And then there are some tools out there that you can use to assess whether or not that influencer's audience is a reliable audience. There's one that's on, I think the website is influencermarketinghub.com. So Influencer Marketing Hub has a free tool where you can drop an Instagram account and it'll do a score and say, well, this person has this many followers. We judge their followers to be good. Their engagement rate is good. So it gives you a little bit of a directional kind of point as to whether or not a single influencer is any good or not. I would say that those algorithms that power that tool and other tools like it are not always perfect. I've actually run somebody through that I knew had a high number of fake followers, and it came back and said that they were good, that they had about 20% fake followers, which they have more than that. I know that for sure. So they're not always reliable, but it at least gives you an idea. If you see a bad score on something like that, then you probably want to avoid that particular influencer. But I would always go back to, when you consume their content, do you think it will motivate people that you're trying to reach to do what you want them to do? And if so, then that influencer probably will be a good investment for you.
Definitely. So in terms of that tool that you mentioned, so does that work only for Instagram or right across the social networks?
Yeah, that one on Influencer Marketing Hub, they have an Instagram tool. I don't think they have another tool. They do have some other tools for like TikTok and whatnot, but I don't think they have the audience scorecard. If you actually subscribe to some of these influencer marketing softwares, most of them come with some sort of, here's what we know about their audience, and we think this percentage is fake or bots, or this percentage is real people. They're all sort of incorporating that score now, because it's an emerging problem that's not really going to go away anytime soon.
Fantastic. So, and Jason, if I hear you correctly, what you're basically saying, if you're a business owner out there and you want to get involved in influencer marketing, ensure that you do your research.
Oh, absolutely.
Do your research and ensure that you're engaging with the right person. So, Jason, I know our time is limited. I want you to jump into your book. Tell us about the book.
Yeah, so the title again is Winfluence: Reframing Influencer Marketing to Ignite Your Brand. It's now available. The launch date is actually next week, but for whatever reason, Amazon started shipping it early, so people are starting to get it. And basically, in that book, I kind of spell out sort of what I've talked to you about today, that we're looking at influencer marketing through these with blinders on at this very small sliver of what influencer marketing can be for your business, and we need to broaden that horizon and think of it a little differently. Instead of calling it influencer marketing and focusing on the noun, on the channel where we're going, let's focus on the action, the verb that we're trying to do. We're trying to influence people, right? So let's look at it more broadly so that we can think more broadly about it. Because if you really think about how can you influence the audience you're trying to reach? Well, you can influence them through your own content. You can influence them through online influencers that have big audiences that you can partner with, but you can also influence audiences through, political lobbyists, political activists and leaders. You can influence them through community leaders. We did a campaign for a local hospital healthcare system in Central Kentucky a couple of years ago, and our key influencers in that were the CEO of the local urban league chapter, and a dentist, and a real estate agent, and a couple of them had some online followings, but they weren't, big, huge followings of hundreds of thousands of people, because we were looking at a small geographic footprint. We were looking at a local influence marketing program, and in a local community, it's not going to be a big time YouTuber that has the impact. It's going to be the people who are active in the community, the people that touch lots of other people in that community. So having a dentist who, goes in and out with 40 or 50 people a week, treating them, who can talk to them about what this particular medical center is doing. Now, all of a sudden, we've got someone who's going to have real impact and real influence. So you've got to start thinking about influence from a strategic perspective and a broader perspective, rather than just being fascinated with Instagrammers and YouTube.
Fantastic. So, Jason, you touched on your clients, but I want you to tell our audience, walk us through your process for a new client.
So for a new client, obviously, because I work at a full service agency, we typically start off with, okay, we need to really immerse ourselves in your brand. We need to know everything there is to know about you, about your audience, who are you trying to reach? What are your goals? What does growth look like for your business, and what are you trying to get out of your marketing budget? Once we start to answer those questions, we can zero in on, okay, who is our target consumer, and what do we know about them? We need to know where they eat, who they talk to, who they trust, what TV stations they watch, what magazines they read, what blogs they read, what social networks they're on. So we try to do that research to understand everything we can about that audience. And then we try to develop, a creative brief to tell our art directors and our copywriters, okay, here's the audience, here's the goal, here's what we're trying to communicate to them. Let's come up with some creative that will do that. And so we brief our creative team. We challenge them with the sweet spot of the message to get people to take that action. And then we come up with a really good media plan and distribution strategy that's either paid advertisements, depending upon what part of the audience we need to have see paid advertisements. There might even be direct mail and point of sale and all those, kinds of things. Outdoor might be involved as well. But for the most part, my team on my end of the spectrum, we look at the digital space and say, okay, where is this consumer, and who do they trust, and where do they go for their information and news, and how can we influence them through those channels? And it might be that we're, buying ads on a podcast, but it might also be that we are, from a PR perspective, pitching the client as a guest on a podcast. It might be that we're finding influential people to help motivate folks to go to their website to buy products, or to just follow them on social and engage with them, so they're building awareness over time. So it all goes back to, what is your business goal? Who is your audience, and what do you want them to do? And so we work through a creative strategy process to come up with solutions that help our clients move the needle.
So, and with these new clients, how do you assess timeline for success? How do you set that expectation to the client, or when will they start seeing success? Because as a digital marketer, I get that all the time. So I want to hear it from your perspective.
Well, it always depends. And unfortunately, on the agency side of things, sometimes that's given to you, that's prescribed and said, I have to have this much needle moved by this date, right? Sure. So the client will come in and have an expectation of, I want to sell 1 million units by the end of the year. Sometimes that's not a realistic goal. And so working through the strategic process, though, we have those conversations to say, okay, is it realistic, or do we need to look at another number or another deadline? It always depends. We've got a client right now that it has built an app. And the app is going to launch in the iPhone of the Apple and the Google Play stores and whatnot in the next couple of months. And they want to drive 1 million downloads by the end of the year. And so we're thinking, well, realistically, in the category you're in, with the budget you have and whatnot, is 1 million possible? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. And so we're going to work through that strategic process with them and make sure that we are their partner moving along the way to massage those expectations and get to a point where, okay, here's here's the kind of success we can expect by month 1, by month 3, by month 6, etc. It's always a moving target, and you're constantly feeding information into the machine and learning about your consumers as you go along, getting product feedback as well. So it's constantly something that has to adjust. I would typically say if you're a brand new client and you're going to an agency to start from scratch on building your brand, building a marketing campaign and whatnot, you're probably looking at, until you see, the needle really moving, you're probably looking at least 12, 18, 24 months before you're going to start to see massive success. But if you build from scratch, good quality marketing creative takes that long. It just takes that long for you to figure out what you want to say, who you want to say it to, how you want to say it, and then get it out there in the market and sort of optimize and test as you're going along until you start to see those needles move the way you want them to.
And that's great. I always tell customers the effectiveness of any digital marketing campaign is how well you optimize, how well you use that data, and you fine tune it. Jason, I know we're in the greatest pandemic of all time, right? I want you to tell us how has this impacted your business and your clients?
We've been very fortunate. We of the clients at Cornet, we had, I think, 2 that at the very early end of the pandemic were like, okay, let's push pause, like most people did, and certainly we understood that. But pushing pause means, well, we still have to pay people, we still have to survive. Fortunately, we had enough clients that were also, we don't market on a month-to-month basis. We market, with 18, 24-month planning. So we got to keep moving. This pandemic will adjust as we move along, but we've got to keep moving. So the train is still going. It's leaving the station. Let's get on board and go. And so because we had a nice diverse array of clients, some who wanted to pause, some who were full steam ahead, it didn't really negatively affect Cornet as it might have some other agencies. We didn't have to lay anybody off. We actually wound up having a pretty good 2020 after all was said and done. There were a couple months there where everybody, not just a Cornet, everybody was nervous about what does this mean? But after we got through May and June, we were like, okay, all right, we're still moving. We're still going ahead. We finished the year really strong, signed a new client by the end of the year. We're working on a couple new business things right now. And all the clients that pushed pause have now started back up again, saying, okay, we took a little bit of a blow there, but we can continue to move ahead. Now, that being said, understand that we've got, 3, 4, 5 clients that are travel and tourism clients that have taken a big hit this year. Yeah. Fortunately, they haven't wanted to slow down, and they've been able to figure out how to, keep the funds for marketing going, hoping that on the back end of this thing that travel and tourism is going to open up again. We're still uncertain about what's going to happen there. We don't know if travel and tourism is going to open back up again. But for now, we're, partnering with them to move forward as much as we can, as fast as we can, to try to close the gap on, what their previous levels of engagement were and previous levels of commerce were and what they are now, so that we can get back to normal with them. And hopefully, we get through this pandemic, people get their vaccinations, the cases go down, we get back to a healthier situation, and we can all get back to some degree of normal. But we've been very, very lucky, and we know that we've been very lucky at Cornet because we know there's a lot of other agencies, there's a lot of restaurants, there's a lot of hotels, a lot of tourism destinations, a lot of people that are out of work and businesses that have shut down. So, we feel very blessed to be where we are.
That's great. And Jason, it's funny, we're in 2021 and I've seen it daily. You still have business owners still hesitant to engage with digital marketing. Mm-hmm. They're still traditional from the old school. I want you to tell our audience, talk about the importance of digital marketing to strategic growth now in today's society.
Well, you got to remember, from probably 2001 or 2002, the majority of people are communicating and getting their messages and consuming media online primarily. So it's no longer should we do digital marketing? It's we have to do digital marketing because that's where your consumers are. When you've got, 80% of the population has a Facebook account and they spend more than a couple hours on it a day, well, you got to probably look at Facebook as a possible place to be. And so the world has just shifted. People no longer get their information from television, traditional television, terrestrial radio, magazines, and newspapers. If they do get information from those media sources, they probably consume it on their website as opposed to some sort of physical printed version. So digital is just where consumers are. And so it's no longer a nice to have, it's a must have. And businesses that aren't, very few businesses, I would say, that aren't on the web or using digital in some form or fashion aren't very successful. There's a handful of them out there that probably, can be. I mean, everybody's got to have a plumber, everybody's got to have somebody to mow your grass, et cetera. And there might be some good word of mouth. And I know somebody who does that going on, and people can still stay in business. But if you want to grow your business, there's almost no way you can do it these days without being digital, without being online and plugged into the internet. So I don't think it's a question anymore of should we do it. It's a question of how fast can we get there, because we need to be there.
Fantastic. I was looking at the research the other day. Over 90% of buyers research online first before they actually make a decision. So if you're a business owner listening and you're not online, it's obvious you're losing to the competition. So well said, Jason. So I'm going to ask this question. I know it's wide, but I want you to get a stab at it. What platforms are the most profitable?
Oof! Wow. The answer is almost always it depends. But I think if you're talking very generally, if you want to spend a little bit of money to start seeing the needle move, and test and iterate and get to a point where, okay, we're getting a good ROI here, I think pay-per-click advertising is a great place to start, because at least with searchers who are seeing your pay-per-click ads, you're at least able to target people who are the low-hanging fruit. They are looking for an answer to a question, a solution to a problem, and if your website or your ad or your link can help them solve that, you can get a customer. And so that's a great place to start. If you don't have a whole lot of budget, if you don't have a whole lot of confidence in other channels, start with pay-per-click advertising and get yourself to a point where you have an ROI that makes enough money for you to be able to say, okay, now I can spend a little bit more. You definitely want to shore up your website. Make sure because that pay-per-click ad's got to go somewhere, right? So you need to make sure that you've got a great experience on your website so that customers can come there, understand what you do, who you are, and make a purchase or give you a lead so that you can follow up with them. And that's going to require content, because in order to rank well organically in search, you can't just have a stagnant site. You have to have continual content. That's why blogs are popular, and why many businesses do them, even though they may not feel comfortable calling themselves a blogger, because it's a mechanism to allow you to put recurring content on your website. And that keeps the search engines coming back and looking at your website and making sure that you stay relevant for those keywords that you want to rank for. So paid search, content marketing, organic search. As you're doing the content marketing, it's going to be easy for you to branch out into social, because you can promote that content on social and engage with those audiences there. And then you can get into the more advanced stuff like influence marketing and whatnot as you move through being more successful and comfortable with the channels that you're activating on.
Fantastic answer. And that's how I discuss it with my clients too. PPC is a short-term strategy. If you want to get your ads out there, we could set up right now, and within an hour, you're live, and you're before thousands of millions of your prospective customers. SEO is more of a long-term strategy to build those backlinks and all that. So another, how do you? I get this question all the time. How do you formulate the right marketing budget?
Oof, yeah, that's a big question, because again, it really depends on, you go back to the goal. What's your goal? What audience you're trying to reach, how hard is it going to be to reach them, what mechanisms are going to be the right mechanisms to reach them. Because, to be honest with you, if you want to reach 50 million people by Monday, you're going to have to take out a Super Bowl ad and hope the Super Bowl is Sunday, right? Because there's really no other way to reach that many people that quickly. And if you got to do that at that scale that fast, you're going to need a lot of money, because I think a 30-second commercial on this year's Super Bowl was $5.6 million, right? So that's a big budget for one commercial. But, if your goal is, hey, we want to focus on customer retention, and we want a marketing communications campaign that's really going to serve the customers we already have to upgrade them and upsell them to other products and services, and we really want to focus on them, then that might be something that you can invest, maybe, a few $1,000s in, maybe a few $100,000, depending on how big your business is. And you can focus on things like digital, things like collateral, things like, rewriting customer service scripts and things like that, so that you can start to funnel people back through the cycle to get them to upgrade or buy more. And so it just really depends on what audience you're trying to reach and what you're trying to get them to do. So when you sit down to budget, you look at those channels and those mechanisms and say, okay, let's start with, if we're doing paid media, if we're buying ads somewhere, how much does that cost? How much does it cost to run with the frequency we need to run to be able to get people to do what we want them to do? Because your hard cost of buying ads is a cost that you can't avoid. That's going to be there. So let's say that's $1 million. So you have $1 million and you put that over here. That's how much it's going to cost to just buy the space. Now, how much is it going to cost the creative agency to produce the media that goes into the space? And that's where you got to sit down and say, okay, if we're doing TV, that's a different budget than print. If we're doing outdoor, billboards, that's a different budget than radio, right? So you just kind of have to look at the different mechanisms you're using and be able to say, okay, how much time is it going to take the creative agency to produce the work? And then how much money do we need to go out and buy the space to put those ads? Then there's that sort of, X factor in the middle of, what about our owned content or our earned content? What about PR? What about digital? What about social? What about content for our website? That stuff you don't have to buy the space for. That's either owned or earned. And so really in that perspective, you're just paying for the time it takes to get it done, to produce it. There's not as much hard cost overhead on projects like that. So again, if those channels are relevant to what you're trying to do, then you have to filter through them and say, how much time is it going to take? How much, what's the hourly rate for the people that have to do that? And then you start to plan out the budget that way. Lots of spreadsheets.
Yeah, that's great. That's why it's so important to, as a new business or business owner, to get to do a deep dive, a deep assessment of what you're trying to accomplish. Look at your target. Right? Assess the objectives and see how what specific marketing will be great in that objective. So Jason, I know we're running down. It's almost the end. I want to tell our audience, what is the biggest? If you want to, I know this may be, I'll be on the spot. What is the biggest misconception about marketing?
Ooh, the biggest misconception. I think from a brand or business standpoint, the biggest misconception is that it's not expensive. And I'm not saying that all marketing is expensive, but you got to remember, if you're hiring somebody to write blog posts for you, and that's all you're asking them to do, you may think, well, I've got $100. Well, if that person is going to spend 2 or 3 hours writing, your researching and writing good content for you, and you only have $100 to spend, you're basically asking them to work for, $18, $20 an hour. And typically copywriters in the marketing world make more than that, right? So I think you have to kind of think through, you're not just paying for the creative that gets out there in the world. You're paying for the time it takes to create that creative and make it good and make it strategic and make it work. So I think there's a lot of business owners, especially new entrepreneurs and small business owners, who think, well, maybe it's time for us to go hire an agency to help us. Well, the smaller the agency, the cheaper it's going to be, because you got to remember, if you hire a big agency, they're not bringing one person to the meeting. They're bringing creative directors and art directors and digital people, and that clock's running on the hours, and there's 6 people sitting around the table. You're going to be paying more for that, right? So I think it's really understanding the context of how much things cost, that there's time that goes into it. And if you want it done right, you've got to pay good people a fair rate to be able to get the work done. And I think there's a lot of small business owners who reach out to an agency to start and have sticker shock because they go, oh my gosh, that's way too much money. Have those conversations, understand what it costs and why, and then you can look at your budget and say, okay, this is what I can afford. And there's always going to be someone that will fit into the ability to be able to do that, whether it's an independent consultant or whether it's a big agency and anywhere in between.
That's great. That's great. I always tell business owners, focus on the ROI. At the end of the day, sometimes it may be painful to add, this in your budget. It may be a little bit more expensive, but judge it on the performance and what you're getting back. Because if we spend $1 million for the month and then we're getting back $2 million at the end of the month, I mean, it works.
That's pretty nice.
It makes sense, right? We're positive. So, so you have to look at budget and digital marketing in that from that perspective. Jason, I want you to tell us from your perspective, where do you see the digital marketing space in the next 5 to 10 years going?
Well, I mean, I think you're almost going to have to drop the digital because it's just going to be marketing. I mean, the digital space, the internet, this is where people are. This is where people live. There's very few ad agencies these days that specialize in traditional media, print, TV, radio, because even all the print, TV, radio outlets are also online. And so the digital world is the world. And so this is just marketing now. And so I really feel like because the media landscape is fractured and you've got multiple channels, whether it be traditional media or new media, blogs, influencers, individual, accounts on social networks are now media outlets in and of themselves. Because we've got such a fractured digital landscape, I do think influencer marketing, influence marketing is going to become one of the 3 or 4 main things that businesses look at, because they're not going to be able to get the right concentration of the right audience of people anywhere else. And they're also going to be able to narrow in on the absolute right audience, because let me tell you something, if you sell a product that your ideal consumer is a 30-something guy who likes to go camping and cook out on the grill a lot, then you can be a lot more efficient with your advertising spend by going to Derek Wolf at Over the Fire Cooking, who has over 1 million followers on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube. But that's the only audience he has. It's those 30-something guys who want to know how to cook out better on the grill. That's his core, and you can get that hyper-focused with influence marketing. So I just see that industry maturing so much over the next 5 years that it becomes kind of, in the old days, it was TV, radio, print, maybe direct. I think it's probably going to become search, influencer, content, and maybe multimedia, online video, online radio.
That's great. Great conversation, Jason. It has been fantastic. One more question before we go, and it may make you think a little bit. If you can tell us one thing in life that you need to invest more in, what would that be?
Self-care. That's easy. Like I went through a divorce about 6 years ago, and because of the stress associated with that, I started meditating. And I've had a meditation practice now for about 5 years, and I meditate every day. And it's not a religious thing. Anybody can do it. But whether it's meditation or whether it's going to the gym or whether it's eating right or whether it's reading a book and taking yourself away from screens, focus a little bit of time every day on just taking care of yourself. The media world we live in today is too much. It's too distracting. It's too busy. It fries our brains. Step away from it and take care of yourself so you can recharge your batteries every day. That's the one thing that I would tell anybody, regardless of whether it's business or not. Always do that.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. Your health is your wealth.
Absolutely.
Your health is your wealth. And Jason, for our audience, I just want to tell our audience how can they reach you? You're listening to this and they want to get in touch with you.
Sure. So Cornet is at Team Cornet, TEAM, Cornet.com. I'm at jasonfalls.com, and I'm Jason Falls on all the social networks. So just reach out. I'm glad to connect.
All right, Jason. Again, sir, has been fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the opportunity to be with us today. We learned a lot about what you do and influencer marketing. So until next time, I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, Andre.